So, Dr. Lam, what prompted you to start Us2AI?
I'd love to tell you the story of how Us2AI got born. You see, as a cardiologist, it really pains me that 1 in 3 of us still die of heart disease when I know that we have the drugs or the devices to actually prevent death and hospitalization if only the diagnosis were made earlier. I'm a heart failure specialist, and in heart failure in particular, the diagnosis is made only after the patient suffers symptoms for many months and lands up in hospital. It's in those months where patients are seeing general practitioners, for example, where we need to make the diagnosis if we could only have the tools. And that's where Us2AI got born. The aim is to automate the fight against heart disease, to democratize the most important tool that we have to make a diagnosis of heart disease early, and that's ultrasound or echocardiography of the heart.
So how did you come up with Us2AI as a name?
So at first the name was Echo AI. I suppose it makes intuitive sense because ultrasound of the heart is called echocardiography and its basis is artificial intelligence. However, we decided to rebrand as Us2 because it's more than just the heart. It's actually ultrasound. So Us stands for ultrasound, and it is enabling ultrasound for everyone like us too.
So, since starting Us2, have your ideas evolved since the conception?
Since starting Us2, my ideas have only grown, and the ambition is just, I want to reach the moon, and here's the moonshot aim. It's to really put ultrasound into the hands of everyone, and heart health, therefore, reachable to everybody like us as well. And I'll tell you why. It's because it started out with the aim of simplifying and automating the interpretation of ultrasound of the heart. But following which, we realized that if we had the right combination of hardware and software, if we had the right training and education that went around it, we would not only enable experts to do this faster and more accurately, we'd be able to democratize the entire solution to people who at the moment can't do the ultrasound. And so it's become bigger, if anything.
Just explain how much of a global problem heart failure is with preserved ejection fraction.
Heart failure is a huge global health problem. There are 64 million people around the world who suffer from it, and more than 1 billion people are at risk of it. So what is heart failure? Well, when we say kidney failure, people understand it. It's the end organ failure. Well, guess what? Heart failure is far more common, and it's the commonest cause of hospitalizations among the elderly, costing us more than $100 billion a year. So it's a huge problem. And the greatest problem, I think, is that there are many people who are suffering it whose diagnoses have not been made. What you need to make the diagnosis is really accessible and accurate ultrasound of the heart, which is echocardiography. Once a diagnosis is made, we have a lot of effective therapies that can actually prevent the onset of heart failure or even prevent the hospitalizations and the deaths for a patient who already has heart failure.
What have been the challenges of diagnosing heart failure with preserved ejection fraction in the past? Why is this such a big problem for us?
Heart failure remains a real diagnostic challenge, and the reason underlying that is that in itself it's defined as a clinical syndrome. What that means, its diagnosis is made based on just symptoms and signs of the patient. That's it. That's heart failure. The problem is, patients who suffer from heart failure are elderly or obese, and the symptoms are breathlessness, fatigue, a little bit of ankle swelling perhaps. I mean, hands up, all of us who've actually experienced any of that. So that's the problem. The clinical syndrome and symptoms are non-specific, and you need the objective testing, which is ultrasound. Now, ultrasound or echo of the heart, unfortunately, right now, is only available in specialist centers. But that's not where these patients first present with breathlessness. They go to general practitioners and non-specialists who cannot do the ultrasound of the heart. So you see there's a disconnect there, and we really need to get the diagnostic tool, which is entirely safe and should be entirely accessible, into the right hands.
Can you explain to us the difference and the problems associated with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction and heart failure that have reduced ejection fraction, and why one of them presents such a big problem for us?
So heart failure world is divided into, in general, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction and heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, a mouthful, so I'm going to say HFpEF and HFrEF, and then there's a middle group.
Okay.
Now, from the definition, you can understand that in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, or HFpEF, ejection fraction, which is a measurement that we get from echocardiography, is, by definition, normal. You see, the problem is, if it's normal, and if that's the only thing you look at in an echo report, you're going to miss the diagnosis completely, because heart failure can be there with a preserved ejection fraction. And in fact, that form of heart failure is becoming the dominant form of heart failure in aging societies. So it is critical in the diagnosis of HFpEF to be able to have Doppler echocardiography, to look at the function of the heart beyond just the ejection fraction. And not only to look at the left ventricle, but to look at the left atrium as well. So you need a comprehensive look at the heart to make that diagnosis. It's a little bit more challenging than in HFrEF, where what you have is the clinical symptoms and signs and simply a reduced ejection fraction, and you're there.
And how does US2AI solve that problem for us?
US2AI is the only fully automated, comprehensive platform that interprets the full range of echocardiographic variables, from structural variables to functional variables, including Doppler echocardiography. What this means is that with a full automation, you get a full report and reading of all the structures of the heart, including the function, enabling a diagnosis of HFpEF. In essence, it turns something that usually takes us humans at least 30 minutes and 250 painful clicks. It's a very manual process with a lot of variability, because once it's manual, there's variability, 20% variability, changes all of that to no clicks, no variability, and literally a full report in less than a minute.
So, Dr. Lam, do you see the combination of the Cosmos and US2AI providing a screening service for heart failure in the future?
I absolutely see the combination of US2AI and the Echonos Cosmos as a screening tool. Not only do I see it, we're in a pilot study that is showing that this is going to be possible, and those results are expected soon. It's very important, though, that as a screening tool, say in the hands of nurses or in a generalist or internist hands, that it makes sense to screen because we have therapies. And this is where we are really at an inflection point in cardiology. For the first time, we actually have therapies that can prevent hospitalizations, even for heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. It's really landmark. It was a press announcement of the EMPEROR PRESERVE trial, the first trial to hit its primary endpoint and improve clinical outcomes for patients with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. And very recently, we also had the first drug that was FDA approved for some patients with HFpEF, and that was sacubitril/valsartan, which is a blockbuster drug from Novartis. So we're really at this point where therapies are emerging, therapies are getting approved, and therefore there is all the more an urgent need to make this diagnosis and to get these effective therapies to the right patients.
Tell us a little bit more about US2AI and what service it provides to the for heart failure.
Us2AI is software that automates the interpretation of echocardiography. What makes it different is that it is a comprehensive platform that automates the measurement and the interpretation of 23 measurements of the echocardiogram, which includes not only the left ventricle, but also the left atrium, the right ventricle, and not only two-dimensional information, but also Doppler information, which includes traditional flow Doppler, as well as tissue Doppler, and continuous wave Doppler. Now, once you have this basic set of 23 variables, you can make meaningful diagnosis such as heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, something that you cannot if you only have ejection fraction, for example. What I'm really excited to share is that we are the first to have FDA approval for the automated analysis of all 23 variables. And this is after validation in a landmark study against human expert readers at the Brigham.
Do you see this being of value in other hospital settings outside of the Echo Lab?
Absolutely. In fact, even more value outside of the Echo Lab. Now, Us2AI does automate the full interpretation of the echocardiogram. And that may seem intimidating to non-echocardiologists. However, it's like the basic building blocks that's needed to then get to just a simple final diagnosis of normal or not. And that is the first thing that comes out of the report. Is the left heart normal or not? Is the right heart normal or not? And finally, we can put that together in a probabilistic type of statement such as consider the probability of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction or pulmonary hypertension. All these conditions are extremely well known to many physicians that and you also know you have to pick it up early and that you have to treat accordingly. So that's how I think it's going to reach everyone.
You must have evaluated a lot of products when you were looking to partner with a company. Tell me what criteria brought you to EchoNous and Cosmos.
In the ultimate dream to put echocardiography in everyone's hands, it was very obvious that we needed to look for a partner, a mobile ultrasound partner. So it's true, we tried a lot of the usual suspects, if you may. And the minute I actually put my hands on the EchoNous Cosmos, it was love at first sight, and I'll tell you why. First of all, it's the quality of the images. Extremely important because some of the competitors, the images are just not of good enough quality. The probe doesn't allow the depth and the clarity that one needs to make a proper diagnosis for the heart. So that's immediately the quality of the images. Far superior and in fact comparable to any of the cart-based machines that I've used. And in fact, the EchoNous data show that. Secondly, it's amazing that this point of care ultrasound can do Doppler. I just started going to town trying the Doppler, not just for Doppler conventional flow, but then doing it for tissue Doppler. And then the clincher really came when continuous wave Doppler was added to the Cosmos. That is a total differentiator. And the minute you can do continuous wave Doppler, that opens up the possibility of making a diagnosis of aortic stenosis, for example, one of the commonest valve conditions in the world, and for example, pulmonary hypertension. You need continuous wave Doppler for that. But now, what am I looking at then? That's hardware. In this little thing that I could carry in my purse, that's comparable to these huge, expensive cart-based machines. I immediately thought, my goodness, if we combine this top of the world-class type of hardware with our, frankly, world-class as well, best-in-class software for interpretation, we've got an unbeatable combination here. It's going to put literally a power tool into the hands, maybe first with cardiologists, but then definitely even outside of cardiology, to make the diagnosis of heart disease earlier, faster, more accurately, and all of that means better patient outcomes, which really, really motivates me.
Tell me some of the things that you look for as being essential when you're partnering with a company for your software solution.
So our US2 software solution really interprets the images that have already been acquired. We all know garbage in, garbage out. If we do not have good quality images coming in, we're not going to be able to make a good quality interpretation. Now, the software platform includes that. It includes an assessment of the quality of the images, and we simply will not produce a measurement if it's not reliable. However, now imagine if we actually pair it with the best quality images that can be obtained. And that is, without a doubt for me, the Equinos Cosmos for POCUS, it's got the best quality images. So imagine now we got good quality information coming in. Our software then gets amplified in its ability to be useful and make measurements and make predictive diagnosis. So it's a really important combination.